welcome you all to the final session of the DENT Mini Summit. It will be a panel discussion. I would like to invite panel members. First, we have this unique situation here. The panel moderator is joined virtually. So she is Roopa. She is in the call. You will see her soon. So she is with NVIDIA, and she'll be doing the moderating this whole panel discussion. This is her profile. I'm not going to read out now. Next, I would like to invite Jason Long from Amazon. So he's the head of networking for Amazon Physical Retail Technology. Next, we'd like to invite Charlie Wu, the Vice President of Solution Engineering in Delta Electronics. Then we have Larry Ho. Hi, Larry. Larry is the chairman of the HCore and VP of Software Engineering. Then we have Manodipto Ghose. He's with Keysight Technologies. I think that we can turn off the projector after this, right? Yeah. Then we have Bruno Banelli from the Chief Emerging Architect at Sartura. And of course, I would like to welcome Roopa. I think over to you, Roopa.
Yeah.
Now you can see.
Can you see me and hear me?
No. So the speakers will be.
Am I audible?
You're audible, Roopa.
I can't hear anybody on the floor without the mic, though.
Can you hear me now?
Okay. Hello, everybody. Can I start?
Can you hear us now, Roopa?
Yeah,
Okay.
I can hear you.
Very good.
Yeah.
Yes, we can start.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. It's great to be here. And I really apologize for this whole remote situation. I was supposed to be in there on the floor. But yeah, let's hopefully make this work. Sorry about this. Okay, so as you know, I'm at NVIDIA, and a little bit more background of my background is I was part of the SwitchDev project when it originated, and I've been part of this whole Linux ecosystem around hardware acceleration, kernel, whether it's on the host side or switch fabric side. So I'm very passionate about the DENT project. So thanks to the DENT project for inviting me here to actually moderate the session today. So let's get started. As you heard the DENT board chair, Jason, talking about the key ecosystem, DENT ecosystem and DENT tenets and the guiding principles, whether it's open source or how the source is licensed or the distributed edge scenario, and the testing, DENT testing ecosystem, and hardware and SwitchDev driver model, the kernel dependency, and everything that goes along with it. So we all want to hear how do you see your organization aligning to your organization strategy actually aligning with the DENT guiding principles? Yeah, happy to hear anything you have to say there.
Okay. This is Charlie from Delta. So we are very happy to attend this DENT community because Delta is starting from developing the switch for enterprise, but now we also extended to the retail as well as the data center field. We are investing because Delta mainly is a hardware company, so we are not only support the switch portion, we also have a very strong camera portion because within retail, two key components, switch and camera. So we trying to work with all the chip company and to catch their most new chip developing and to build the best hardware environment for all you guys, the software expert, to utilize our hardware to perform the function you require. And we are very custom oriented, so we can do all this custom design because overall we think this retail market automation or autonomous will be the future. So we are heavily invested in this area, and we hope this can be continued and see any contribution from hardware, say DNI or Delta can do. We will definitely perform that. Thank you.
Hi, this is Larry from EdgeCore. So to this question, EdgeCore strategy in desegregation networking from day one have been believing that everything needs to be opened. This is all about, at the end, customer values. And the reason why there are interest in desegregation network is because of the TCO that it brings, the benefits. And if you look at the true TCO, a big part of it is the vendor independence. We're hearing from customers over and over again that they do not like, not only do they now, at the early stage of desegregation, people are just focusing on multi-sources, buying it from multiple hardware vendors, multiple software vendors, and so on and so forth. But at the end, now, there's an added requirement, and that is no vendor locked in. They do not want to have single dependency on any vendors, whether it is hardware or software. So the hardware part is easier because there are many vendors that are making similar switches once you open it up. Software part becomes more challenging. And this is where open source comes in. Now, there are more additional challenges. I'm not going to go down into the details. But at the end, this is all about openness, and it's about open source. And this fits right in with EdgeCore's strategy.
I think from the Amazon side, probably some of the biggest ways that we're trying to interact with the DENT guiding principles is really by making sure that what we use in our production environments is the same thing that exists in the community. So we have some security processes that we do to sign our images with our CAs and enable secure boot. But other than that, the hardware is the same hardware that you could get from DNI or from EdgeCore. If you're any other user in the community, the software is the same version of the software that exists out on dent.dev. We use the test framework, and as we develop that, we contribute the things we develop back into the project and continue to kind of use this sort of public first approach where the public version of DENT is what we deploy internally so that we can drive all of the benefits of the testing at our scale and the production deployments directly back into the community from the version of all of the different components that are available.
So I would like to go back to the tenets of DENT, right? So if you have looked at the tenets of DENT, it says testing as one of the key tenets of DENT, and that's where we as Keysight came into DENT ecosystem because we also believe in testing. We are a testing company. And open source and disaggregation, like Larry mentioned, right, is kind of the core of innovation today. So, and we completely align ourselves with that. So that's why we think that we have open sourced a lot of our testing methodology and testing scripts across different open source projects, including DENT and Sonic. By doing that, what we are also bringing into this ecosystem is we are more aligning ourselves to the communities, and we have other Ixia community versions that we are providing to other communities as well as the DENT to start using testing as an integral part of the development. And with all this as a centerpiece, and again, DENT being such an open source project, and we've worked with Amazon closely from the inception of DENT, and we were already part of the test infrastructure, luckily here as well. So that all that played a very good, important role of us aligning ourselves with DENT, like any other open source project that we have worked with, and we're happy to contribute here and happy to help DENT adoption going forward.
Well, we from Surtur are trying to keep it to the core, making the best of that open source can offer. This means mainlining everything that all the contributors are trying to achieve and put in the project. thus making the project, the true open source and what it was actually meant to be in the first place. So this is where we're particularly proud that the things that are done in the community and in the group are actually pushed forward, and everybody is allowed to use it and utilize it, and then, consequently join us back.
Thanks, panel. Thanks for sharing your thoughts on this. And I think DENT has done an amazing job of having these subgroups or working groups focused on each of these tenets, which is great to see. So next, we do want to hear some adoption stories, whether it's contribution or support or deployments, anything that you want to share. It could be your customers or partners. Anybody interested in having stories, deployment stories to share? Well, we've heard from Jason and the Amazon deployment.
I can take that. I cannot answer the deployment story, but because you said contribution and support, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
One of the contribution that I spoke about in my presentation was about the system integration test lab that we brought to DENT. That has been helping a lot, and that's going forward. We want to enhance that. We continue our investment in that. And also we want to support the community in whatever fashion that we can help. One of the aspects that has been brought about in a lot of conversation is about certification, and we are open to work with more partners and bring in some kind of certification, because that's what we add value. We bring in the test and validation aspect to this community. So that's another aspect that we want to contribute and support the community. And last but not the least, I think we've talked about it as well. This community lab is also provisioned to have customer POCs and evaluations taken care of. So we want to accelerate that option by doing the same. Thanks.
Well, since we are based in Europe, and luckily now we have another entity, and that's Linux Foundation Europe as well, we are very interested in exploring the options, especially the ones that are already deployed very successfully. And this is, of course, Amazon here, because there is much traction in Europe now. We've brought the kid back to the mother, since it all started in Europe. Then, with all due respect, we'd like to put some effort there as well. So, getting traction of the project in Europe is actually Certura's goal, at least the short-term one, and we would like to see some success in it.
Yes, you're right about that. Many kernel developers for the SwitchDev project have been from Eastern Europe.
So in terms of deployment, I totally agree with Manu about you got to get it deployed ready. And this is a big challenge for the community. So this DENT OS or DENT project is not a lab exercise. At the end, it's not just about putting the source code on GitHub and call it done. So what is it that is ready? The other open source projects, you see all the time right now, it's getting a lot of momentum, but the challenge right now, you keep hearing from the customer is, how do I get the support that I need? Not just day 2 and day 1, but throughout the entire life cycle. This is the part that we need to prepare ourselves. And then, of course, in terms of trying to help promoting and deploying this, the message is out. I kid you not, I have a customer sitting right outside. He's so interested in DENT, he fly all the way from France and want to meet with me and talk about DENT, and he cannot come in because he didn't register. So he's sitting in the lobby right now. No, he cannot. Linux Foundation will not let him come in, so you're violating. I'll bring him in, so. But I already told him, I said, I'll meet him at 5 o'clock, but when this is over, maybe I'll introduce you guys to him. But there's a lot of interest right now. Jamil, Let me see if he's there. I'm sorry, this is interrupting. I shouldn't be doing this, but in terms of deployment, you know, this right on the money, I'm telling you. We're trying to promote the DENT message out there.
Great. Okay.
Yeah, no problem. Hot take.
This is great. Should we proceed to the next one? Or
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay. Okay. So, well, we've heard Amazon speak about DENT in retail stores, right? And DENT is all about the NOS for the rest of us, like Jason said in his keynote for the summit. And so, what do you think DENT should be doing more as an ecosystem, you know, to become the de facto NOS for the distributed edge?
You want to go first? You want me to go first? I'll let you. So I think the number one thing that the community needs to do, in my opinion, is get more deployment stories. We need to be able to have more end users that get experience with DENT. I think as a project, we've been actively working to try to talk about the benefits. I think one of the things that hopefully will accelerate now is that I know oftentimes end users, especially enterprise edge users, don't necessarily want to be first movers. So hopefully now that we've been able to be a lot more public about our use of DENT, that will add confidence. But I think for a community and everyone participating in the community, the best thing you can do is go evangelize the benefits of DENT to your specific portion of the market and to your customers and to the segments of the networking world that you engage with.
Well, unfortunately, I'll have to get back to Europe again. You remember the partially success story that the city of Munich, so it is a large South German city, had with the Linux implementation in general. Now, what we actually want to achieve is the fact that we try to draw these kind of clients as well. So governments, municipalities, everyone who want to get a good taste of open source in a segment that was traditionally very closed. Okay, we have commercial entities using that. We have various success stories, primarily being the Amazon ones. So, don't get me wrong, but if this is good enough for Amazon, I don't see why it wouldn't be more than good enough for a local municipality, for parts of government, because the benefits they get are literally unmatched with anything that they are using at the moment.
Yeah, I don't have much to add because I think Jason covered a couple of points, right? One is the adoption has to kick in, and thanks to Amazon for the endorsement. I think that's going to help drive a lot of adoption. I think that's what is the key right now that we have to do. Yeah, Larry.
Okay, well, I also agree with Jason's point. I think at this stage, getting another retail operator to sign on onto DENT is probably a key priority, if not the top priority. The idea is the next time we have this summit, we don't want Amazon to dominate this. Not that I don't like Jason, but it's the idea. You want to give the people that are interested in DENT the notion that this thing is not just run by and dominated by Amazon. This is a community, and that's by definition, that's what you want, and it's operator-driven, and that even be better. So that's the one point. The other points I want to add is, I think it was Steve earlier in his talk that talks about maybe looking at, for example, how to adopt SI. And this is about drawing in more ASIC vendors that have reluctance in the current model. And so it's all about getting it. You look at the success of Sonic, how does it really takes off and fly? It's when all the ASIC vendors trying to jump in at the same time, and they realize that this is something that they can play in. So this is not about idealistic, in my view. I'm trying to be pragmatic here. It's about trying to get the broad acceptance. By bringing in more ASIC vendors, in general, the next thing you know is there are more switch vendors that will come in. And now you have a proliferation of the infrastructure. And now the community can boost up. So to me, this is the other thing. There are additional challenges, of course, about the internal deployment ready and all that, but I'll just leave it at this for now.
Okay. From hardware vendor point of view, we are very willing to do any custom design, because end up every time we engage customer, they will request a little bit change here and there. So we are willing to do any, although then right now, like all the gentlemen say, we do not have a big customer yet, but we are willing to invest this resource to do custom design in order to push this then to be more successful. And it's a chicken and egg. Once you have successful, everybody wants to jump in, so this will become much stronger.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. Adoption is key, and bringing more vendors is key. And I think for DENT especially, like for the existing implementation of vendors, right? I think it's the only OS that is very lightweight that can go places in the edge space because of its, being the light layer. It does not have a user space, heavyweight stack, and so on. I think adoption in that angle to take it to more places is also key on moving the needle. So you mentioned Psy and Sonic and so on. I think there was, Stephen also mentioned Psy and how DENT could leverage Psy and so on. So next question is actually diving into that. So since I was part of OCP as well, so I've seen Sonic grow in the past few years in the data center space, and DENT is perfect for the small retail embedded place. And there's, I think in both the ecosystems, there is a lot that can share. As you know, OCP has been trying to drive that as well in terms of sharing between communities. And it's the same thing. The same FRR runs on DENT, same FRR runs on Sonic. So there is room for that, unified ecosystem. So what are your thoughts on DENT and Sonic, and do you see them coexisting? And I know you mentioned Psy. Anybody else wants to elaborate on what your thoughts are, and how do you want to see this go?
Yeah, so I think from my perspective, I think the DENT and Sonic are two attempts to try to solve similar problems for different use cases. And because of that, they prioritize different things. And I think that I see them coexisting for as long as both are vibrant communities. I don't think that there ever needs to be a one or the other question. I think that Sonic was developed for the data center, and it will, it's moving closer to the edge. DENT was developed for the edge, and there's discussions about it could move closer to the data center. There will probably be places where they overlap in the middle and provide customer choice around what they want. But I think that, like you mentioned, Roopa, really the key is that we designed DENT from the very beginning to be optimized for that edge use case and to be really lightweight and to allow us to do interesting things with hardware in ways that, in all of the times I've looked at it, I don't think Sonic would be a good fit for that particular use case. But that doesn't mean that it isn't a great fit for data centers. That's, it doesn't have to be one or the other. And I think when it comes to the Psy question, I think it really comes down to, I think, what Larry was talking about, which is, okay, how do we make sure that we can get the ASIC vendor support that's required to be able to grow diversity across the board? And there are certain things about the switch dev only approach that I think from a purely technical perspective, in my opinion, are superior. But technical reasoning isn't the only thing that needs to drive strategy. And at the end of the day, we have a place now where I think we're seeing kind of a little bit of a market effect on Psy adoption within the ASIC vendor community that if there's a way to stay true to the guiding principles that we have in DENT and minimize abstractions and use the sort of, Linux first approach while still bringing Psi on board to increase hardware diversity and to increase even end user choice, because if at the end of the day you can run DENT or Sonic on the same box, then that drives the type of choice that we all want for disaggregation. And so I think that's what we're looking at, but it's the key to all of this, and the thing that I think my teams are really deep diving right now, I know the TSC will probably be talking about in the coming months, is can we do that in a way that keeps true to those guiding principles for DENT? And if we can find a way to do that, then I think there's nothing but positive reasons to go ahead and look at bringing Psi support into DENT. But that doesn't mean it gets closer to Sonic. Like, at the end of the day, Psi is this tiny shim that has a whole bunch of other things wrapped around it in Sonic. And I think what we're looking at is taking that tiny shim and bringing it into DENT without all of the other things in Sonic, because those are the things that I think aren't a good fit for the edge use case that we're trying to solve.
Yeah,
Anybody else want to?
makes sense.
Yeah, I just want to echo what Jason just said. Right now, we are developing the sandbox can run both Sonic and DENT in the sandbox. So that's our, at least right now, is our direction.
So I think it is important to recognize something that I've seen in a talk, even in today's talk, by multiple presenters in multiple slides. Even in the DENT summit here, we use the term distributed edge. And yet, a lot of the presentation is focused on retail. To me, those two things are not the same. Now, I think in Jason's slides, he talks about the additional use cases, the hospitals, and so on and so forth. That's one thing, right? By the same token, a lot of people in Sonic have their mind blocked down and say, this is for data center. Well, if you look at the whole networking, just look at networking in general, there's a lot of paradigm shift over the last 8 years before when Sonic was first created. I think Jason just now alluded to that a little bit about that, right? So the paradigm is shifting. So there is always room for overlapping between the two spaces. We just need to have an open mind, and also, in my opinion, you need to build a collaboration bridge between the two communities. At the end, it's all open source. It's perfect that Sonic now is in Linux Foundation. The only part I don't like is they start charging for the Sonic workshop. Used to be all free. I'm telling you, I don't like that. I used to be able to attend free. Now I have to pay for it. So that's the part that I don't like. But doesn't matter. I would just tell that to Linux Foundation space. But the idea is collaboration between communities. That is the key to keep the two things going in parallel and do that.
Okay, cool. Thank you, panel. So the next question is around how do you see DENT? Sorry, give me a second here. So hardware support. Let's talk about hardware support. What exists today? I think the talks in the morning covered a bit, but anything else that's coming in the roadmaps, right? Anything that will take DENT, will favor DENT or enable DENT users take it to new places. Even if it's current hardware support, it's enabling new features for DENT, for the distributed edge.
So the progression of the ASICs itself is a natural driver for the hardware, for the switching. By hardware, I imagine you're asking for switch. So the switch itself, it's for edge core at least. Our first generation DENT switches are AliCat 3 base, and now it's progressing to AliCat 5X. And it is a natural progression. Right now, what we are still not seeing is the need for external CPU. There's some that is actually asking for that. It's now in a crossroad. And so it depends on whether that is hard and heavyweight. And then as it started to add features and it started to to, I want to not use the word heavy because that's not the thing, but then again, earlier in the some of the presentations, it also said it's not about thin. So the whole idea is not just the ASIC itself, but also the processor architecture. We're going to have to pay attention in what's coming on. For EdgeCore, we have submitted a PR to contribute our ArctiCAD 5X switches. That's ongoing, and we'll continue to do that in the future.
Yeah, same as Delta, we are working on the AC5X right now for the solution. So I think that's the trend. It's actually depend on the chip company. If they develop anything newer, and we definitely are willing to lay out accordingly.
I think I can speak from the end user perspective. Some of the things we're driving on the Amazon side. I think there was discussion about 24 port units. So we're working on 48 port PoE++ hardware platforms right now. That I think we'll probably see being developed into next year. Another really interesting thing on the hardware side that we're spending a decent amount of time looking at is how do we build a device that could potentially sort of take on some functions of some other devices that exist in our network today. So, we have some x86 boxes that do some level of compute in the stores. And so would there be ways to add additional compute into a switch to be able to add that functionality into the switch itself? We're looking at other functionality, whether it be particular wireless spectrums or other things like that. So I think that's another trend that I think we'll see in the edge in the coming year is this look to try to figure out the right optimization between single purpose-built devices and converged multi-use devices. And there's pros and cons on both sides. But I think as we continue to kind of drive towards the innovation in our Just Walk Out stores, we're going to be pushing the boundaries on some of what that can do. And all of that will be powered by DENT and the hardware. Our intention is, we're still early days, but our intention is that the ODMs we partner with, all of that hardware will be available to the community.
That's great to know. Yeah, and to just add from my own past experiences, right? I mean, the DENT OS being the architecture it is, it can even run as a virtual instance, if you will. And we had, you can, if you want to make it happen, it could run in the cloud as a virtual instance. What you get is, or any compute instance running totally in software. What you get out of it is nothing but a standard network OS with the same FRR stack and the same config and operational stack for network services. So
I should add, so that's a good point. I mentioned it briefly earlier in my talks, but we're also looking at non-switching hardware to run DENT on. So we currently have it running on an IoT gateway and on sort of an access control device. We're looking at other use cases like wireless. We're looking at just base x86 compute boxes across the board. Because at the end of the day, it's just Linux, right? So we do all of this work to harden it and to operationalize it and to monitor it. And why not just unify that across all these spaces? So that's another area of hardware development we're working on. And to the virtual point, that's actually something that we're developing on the CI/CD side. We've developed virtual networks that we've fully integrated into our CI/CD systems so that when we have changes that get deployed, we spin up entire virtual networks that run all of the different versions of DENT, that run all of the test cases from the test framework that's in the community, and confirm that whatever change we're about ready to push, whether it's a new OS, whether it's a config change, whether it's some change on a software agent, all runs through a virtualized test platform that's actually the same environment that we would have deployed in sort of in person in a store. And that speeds up our testing and will allow us to fully develop this kind of multi-format, multi-pronged CI/CD infrastructure.
That's amazing. Yeah, that was exactly the promise of DENT, or switched for that matter. And it should be one of the tenets of
It's a good idea.
So, okay, the next question. how being part of DENT has helped your customer engagement or your product roadmap for any vendor, software vendor. Um, any perspectives?
Am I the only software vendor here? Yeah.
Yes.
Well, look, being part of the Linux Foundation project is, well, it takes certain pride in it, and not only that we grow technically, but we also grew in the marketing perspective, making some of our own products, being able to publish them, and always have the fact that while you participate in a project like that, such as DENT is, so with the serious stakeholders, with serious application, it always gives reasonable amount of, you know, esteem to each and every participant. So in that perspective, I believe that, you know, participating in any Linux Foundation project, let alone serious ones such as this, because at the end of the day we have our own track here, right? So this obviously differentiates us, you know, and gives us on the importance. So yeah, it was definitely a game changer, and I certainly hope we will all grow more in parallel. But it's as far as Certura as a software vendor is concerned, absolutely positive experience. Maybe Jason could add some more. They're also doing some software in Amazon, as far as I'm aware.
Sure. I think you know, if we think about our customers as the retailers that would you know, buy our Just Walk Out technology, then I think what DENT allows us to do is it allows us to build this kind of cost optimized, very advanced autonomous retail solution in a way that's very integrated, and that it achieves the incredibly high bar that we set for ourselves at Amazon in availability, in security and sustainability, and it's a key component to all of that. And so the software that we develop on top of DENT, the software that we develop around the rest of the solutions are a key to making all that possible. And I don't think we could have done it in the time frame that we've done this without the community. And that's really the big benefit from my perspective in being a part of this community, is that we've all come together and we've been able to take a solution to market that's pretty incredible in an incredibly short period of time.
Thank you. So next, let's dive into testing a little more. So testing integration is a key tenet of DENT, and we heard Keysight talk about it a little more in the beginning. So let's dive into a little more about how testing integration into DENT has helped both quality and the NOS itself, and any case studies there or any quantitative stats there, anything that the community could use.
Sure, you're asking a testing guy who's been in the industry for 15 years, so I'll take 1 minute each for the year, so 15 minutes an answer. So, no, I don't have I'm thinking if you have a clear metric, but definitely what we have done is with this testing infrastructure in place, and as I said in my presentation, that when we started to involve in this project, get involved in this project, and we spoke to Marvell, we spoke to Amazon, and we found that both in the back end they're using traffic generators in there to validate. So which was kind of a very good thing for us, with easy integration for us to come into this ecosystem, unlike some other open source projects where we have had challenges to get integrated, right? But obviously that speaks a lot about what we have done in our 20 plus years of being in the network testing industry. That we have created a lot of value with all these different customers and network equipment manufacturers, even the cloud hyperscalers, everyone bringing us into this very important aspect. Now, how we have added a lot of value here also is in terms of the open source project. Like I said in my previous my answer also, that we've always felt that this we, as a neutral vendor, as a neutral testing company, we have to contribute a lot to these open source projects. There is obviously a lot of cost efficiency that we talk about when we talk about these open source projects, and that's why we have come back to the community and we have developed community versions of our testing tools. And if you go to the GitHub, if you search for Open Traffic Generator, and if you look at the community version, it's called XCSC, and that's where we have enabled all different open source communities to come in and use our tools to get started with testing, right? So it's an option which takes you further into the into integration with Keysight tools going forward. Obviously the way that we have integrated into the DENT test framework, we plan to also enhance a lot of these test cases, like we are doing with PL Vision team, adding around 200 plus test cases to the test framework, and we also will bring in more of our typical KPIs-based tests, right? So typical customer scenarios, typical convergence and performance and resilience test cases that we have added to other open source communities as well. So overall, it's been a very good experience for us. I mean, we love to work with this community, and we hope that we continue this, and we'll enhance more and more.
Yeah, I'm assuming the DENT releases also heavily leverage this infrastructure.
Yes,
correct?
it does. So every release, obviously, I mean, there's a bi-weekly cadence the test working group runs, and if there is any issues that we come across in this system integration test, we flag that, and if every release, we have to validate and give a go-ahead. So yes, so every release gets through this.
And did I read that it was 400 tests already in the test suite?
No, there is around, I would say, right now around 80 plus test cases. We are adding around 200 plus more. So it will be around 300 cases pretty soon.
Okay, cool. So last few questions, general questions, and what is I can combine these questions, I think. What is the road ahead for DENT? And, what is your message to potential members and contributors out there? I know you've said this in the previous questions in multiple ways, but if you want to just give the last pitch for, what is your message for the community, and also what do you want to see for DENT ahead?
Since I have the microphone, I'll just put my couple of points. So I think we talked about it. We talked about adoption. So that's kind of the main goal that I think we should all move ahead with. So bring in more customers, bring in more vendors, have that adoption scale horizontally. And that's going to help us all progress this ecosystem ahead. I think that's pretty much my summary. Who wants to go next?
So I think what I would add to the things that I said before, so we don't just talk about bringing in more end users again, is I think one of the most important things to having a vibrant open source community is to have a community that contributes to the open source. And so I think that's really the call to action to anyone who's here and who's listening, is get involved. The TSC calls are open, the working group meeting calls are open. There are really engaging technical conversations in lots of ways that anyone can get involved. And whether you're someone in the supply chain or you're an end user, doesn't really matter. You can get involved, and you can bring something unique from your perspective to contribute in, whether that's the conversation, whether that's in code, whether that's in use cases or test cases, whether that's in pilot scenarios and end user requirements. It doesn't really matter. But I think that's the most important thing to make sure that we continue to have a vibrant community is that we have people contributing. And I think if we have an increasing amount of contribution, that will generally lead to an increase in the amount of deployments. And so we should start with that and make sure that the whole community is really healthy and contributing.
Well, for me, I fully support the DENT's founding principles and all the guidelines over there. But I think one thing that always for myself or EdgeCore that we look at when we look at DENT, we ask ourselves, what is what we call the North Star? What is the end game? Or really, it's not an end game, but it is a star that we can look at and say, this is where we declare success for DENT. Don't get me wrong, even Sonic is not there yet for their North Star. But when I look at that and say, where is it? Well, we got customers talking to them, and they like open source, not just because of TCO, but they also like that freedom. They always, ideally, what they like to do is to go download a branch, a release, a build from the GitHub, and it's deployable, fully certified, completely. There's no, I think there was a talk earlier, presentation that talks about IoT problems, sensor problems at deployment. Well, that's not complete. For an end customer, that's part of his deployment. That's part of his day one problem. So it's that notion, that North Star, that needs to guide us to drive towards that. The other aspect that I see that we need to prepare ourselves coming is scalability of our infrastructure. Testing is fine. We want more ASIC vendors. We want more switching vendors, more software, applications, started building these platforms and participate. How are we going to test all of this? And yet maintaining stable branch. As more community members are participating, the more PR submitting. The speed in which a PR goes through while maintaining the branch line. And these are the key challenges that's coming our head. So start thinking about that. Whatever we're doing right now, start thinking about that. And don't just try to do short term. Just start thinking a little bit further out. And that would be the way that I see the road coming for that going forward.
Well, then I'll be the one that will obviously close this. So, except of all of these great points, interoperability, engaging other members, and maybe giving out the word that, look, we have a big player here. Yes, it's Amazon, and yes, I agree with Larry on the previous points, but these guys are not the bullies. They are not intimidating the project. They are empowering it, and there is absolutely no reason why any other large player wouldn't join, because we are not another network operating system. There are some lessons learned from previous experience, from previous projects, and there's truly something valuable and something that started from scratch, that gathered all the different stakeholders, all the different projects that are actually making the foundation of DENT, and there should be no reason that this won't grow, and grow in a good direction, in a positive direction. So that would be it. Join us. We don't bite.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. And thanks for helping me make this work remotely. I hope it was not super weird. I know you all are sitting with your backs to the screen, but thanks a lot, and thanks for the amazing thoughts on the panel.
Absolutely, and thank you, Roopa, for moderating the panel. We really appreciate you joining us, and for making it work yourself, even though you couldn't be here.
Thank you.
Any questions from the audience for the panel? Now is the time to ask the panel members any question you have. Yeah, Vincent. Sorry.
Those of you who's worked with SAI, right? I imagine there were lessons learned. So what do you think could be applied or applicable to that, that we could use so that we can avoid some of the pitfalls or problems that were encountered?
So EdgeCore worked on SAI a little bit. So we have our own implementation of Psi library. First of all, Psi, if you understand, right, the API is opened, and so it's standardized, it's OCP driven. So there is a standard process to add to it. And second of all, the API is so big that I can say confidently not a single Psi library implemented in this world has implemented every API and every attribute. So this is the problem that, sorry, my phone ring, my apology, I forgot to silence it. So this is one of the great thing. It separated the control plane from it, that actually allowed this, and then also the implementation is completely black box by the switching vendor. So the SDK they feel like is totally protected. This is the selling point of Psi. It was until Psi was defined. Sonic was started even when Azure contributed first layer of first batch of code back in even 2000. I think it was 2015 if I remember correctly. It wasn't successful in the first wave until they started this separation and allowed the switching vendor to have their quote-unquote privacy. That's when people feel strong enough to jump in. Believe it or not, some switching vendor thinks of the SDK as, it's the holy blood. So it is not something that they easily would want to disclose. Okay, so it is unfortunately the reality, and it's a pragmatic way of thinking about it.
Yes, so Daniel was talking about the new kind of hardware platforms and putting some compute on a switch. So do you plan or have you evaluated putting like a easy server CPU power on the switch to offload some of the compute on the edge?
I think the answer to that is probably yes or no, or yes and no. Have we evaluated putting a lot of compute power on a switch? Yes. But one of the key problems that we're looking at is how do we keep power utilization down and how do we keep costs down? And so we are not looking at all at server class CPUs because generally speaking, those aren't really appropriate for the types of workloads that we're talking about and the use cases that we're talking about. Also because of that, one of the big things we're doing is we're trying to keep, we've sort of looked at both an x86 add-on CPU as well as an ARM add-on CPU, and we're looking at that from a very similar kind of edge first perspective of what is the power draw, what's the sort of cost per processing unit, what's the power draw for processing performance. So I think we're looking at all of that. The other big thing that we're looking at in kind of this discussion is generally at the edge, it's been my experience that general purpose silicon is less impactful at the edge than purpose-built silicon. And so whether that's an inference chip, whether that's some sort of, very specialized ARM CPU or something else, that will give us the particular use case we want in a way that's a lot more cost, power, and other aspects optimized. Yeah, so I think...
Jason, can you repeat the question and then answer?
Oh, yeah. So the question was that there's a DSA approach that's been out there for quite a while, and have we considered that? And if so, have we dropped it? I believe DSA is something that is often used in sort of home or small office routing devices or wireless devices that have small, like 4-port switches built into them or something. So yes, we have used DSA. In fact, we actually have a wireless access point that we developed that utilizes DSA to be able to do sort of per port programming of a small little 4-port switch. And I think generally speaking, the approach that we've or the sort of perspective that we have is that's really appropriate on sort of small port count devices, but maybe not really appropriate on larger port count devices. And so I think that's been kind of an overarching sort of theme in a lot of our technical deep dives is that there's a lot of ways that you could go about handling switching and routing, but when you get to the place where you have probably something more than 8 ports, a lot of the options start to become less than optimal because you start running into certain problems that an ASIC really helps you solve. And so we keep coming back to, once you get beyond, roughly that 8-port count, you're probably going to want to just have an ASIC. And then once you have an ASIC, you probably don't want to program that ASIC using DSA, because generally speaking, I don't think I've seen a model where an ASIC that can drive 24 or 48 ports at 1 gig is working well with DSA. But that's kind of, at least I think, what we've seen.
Yeah, I would like to add that for DSA, can you hear me? Sorry.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add that DSA existed way before SwitchDev, and over the last few years after SwitchDev has come along, most of the DSA drivers are moving to a single API, right? SwitchDev uses the existing Linux networking API. So DSA drivers are also kind of slowly moving to, at least some of them, moving to implementing the SwitchDev interface so that you can, as from user space or any networking service, can interact with SwitchDev and DSA like the same way. So I just wanted to point that out.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have one question to Larry. So you mentioned a very interesting point, like how do we define success for DENT kind of a thing? You said even Sonic is not there. So if you see, the way I look at it, as long as there are like end users, like more and more end users increase. For example, in Sonic case, the data centers, or in DENT case, it could be more and more retail customers, or maybe like enterprise versions of DENT OS. Like for example, enterprise DENT kind of a thing. Similar, Sonic had multiple enterprise Sonic, different vendors coming up. So are these two the KPIs, or there anything else more than these two?
I used to think those are the KPIs, but now after engaging the last couple of years, that customers that are really interested in Sonic, it is very clear in my mind that there are actually several models. Let me give you a couple of them.
Okay.
What happened to customers that they love this open source things, but they have their own development team. They would love to take the open source and create their, add and create their own internal use. Okay, is the community ready to support that kind of proposition? A more important point, I think I talked about it earlier in my summary, which is customer want pure open source. They do not want distro that are black box. That's the distinction. It doesn't matter how many distro out there. They take a Sonic distro, and then they found out that I created dependency on the supplier of that distro. That's a no-no to many. Why? Because of vendor locked in. That's a big no-no. So to me, I added it to my part of my North Star. Once I start talking to the customers and realizing that this is coming. So there's no difference, no reasons for me to expect that DENT will be different in this role ahead.
Thank you. That reminds of recent Rakuten's moving to pure open source ecosystem like Rocky Linux.
And I think I would add to that when I think about the North Star for DENT in my mind, or what success looks like, I often think about the sort of edge users, or if you broaden it a little bit, the non-data center end users as a little bit like an onion, right? There's all these different layers, and different end users are going to want to interact with DENT in different ways. And success for DENT means we've peeled each layer of that onion, and we've figured out a way to enable that. And maybe one of those are the people that come in and they want to do custom development and build an internal branch off of it. And the complete other extreme, in my head, I always equate it to the way Whole Foods was when we first acquired them. And they were your classic enterprise customer that looked at all of their problems in very much the classic enterprise way. And in order for DENT to be successful as a project, we need to have ways for both of those extremes to be able to interact with the solutions that we're driving, because that's how we truly get the value of disaggregated networking and open source networking out into this distributed end user, distributed edge community where it isn't today. And it's a really big problem to solve. Being from Amazon, oftentimes I'll talk to different vendors or different partners, and they'll talk a lot about hyperscalers, or they'll talk a lot about the data centers. And the reality is that market's targeting like maybe 5 customers. And so you can really focus on what do those 5 customers want. And then there's the sort of halo effect of all of the tier 2 operators and whatnot that will come around based off of what those 5 customers want. The distributed edge is not that. The distributed edge is, hundreds, if not thousands, of unique requirement sets for the different types of customers. And that's the North Star for what success looks like for DENT, is we build something that's robust enough that the community can go solve all those problems. There's never going to be a single person or a single company that solves all those problems, but as a community, we can solve them.
Great, yeah. Okay, so thank you very much, panel members. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Roopa. Thank you so much for moderating this. So here we conclude with this thing. So thanks to all the speakers who joined. Big round of applause to all of them.